Hey everybody, this is Dean Brody. You're listening to Tobin Tonight.
Dean, thank you for taking the time to take our call and be on the podcast.
Yeah, man. No, I'm excited to talk to you about music and all things related. It's going to be fun.
You grew up out on the West Coast in BC. Tell us about your childhood.
I guess my earliest memories are a cattle ranch. My dad was a ranch hand on a cattle ranch in the East Kootenays, southeastern British Columbia. It was an old ranch house, and I had a 4-H steer out there, and I'd get up every morning at 6 o'clock and go feed him, and his name was Major. And I just grew up in the country, man. After that, we had a little hobby farm, I guess about 10 acres, with horses and chickens and rabbits and dogs and all that kind of stuff. And we had one channel. We had a CBC. On a good night, we'd have really good reception on CBC, and my dad actually made an antenna out of beer cans. I remember clearly like him out there during a windstorm trying to figure out how to turn this tin can antenna so that we could get like a really good reception before the hockey game came on Saturday nights. And so we kind of grew up with no entertainment. Like, we didn't have a video game console until I was older, and so we just did a lot of growing up, like out in the woods and down by the river, and just what country kids did back in the day.
And of course, we were mentioning about your dad and setting up the kind of hockey game for the classic Saturday night hockey night in Canada, here in Canada. What teams were you rooting for?
Man, I was a huge Edmonton Oilers fan, and I was in BC. I didn't mind the Canucks, but I guess because I was a kid, I got on the Wayne Gretzky bandwagon, Mark Messier, Yari Curry, Semenko. Those were my guys, and so I kind of grew up. They were a dynasty, of course, and I've kind of had to put my head in the sand the last 20 years until lately. It's like, yeah, I'm an Edmonton Oilers fan, but I'd say that before, and people would be like, oh man, I'm sorry. But no, we're hitting some good times now, I think.
They're starting a new franchise with McDavid, Draisaitl, Nurse. It's going up. Let's go that way. Things are looking up.
It's going a lot better than it was, that's for sure.
You just mentioned about entertainment. There wasn't much there. Is that when you kind of picked up playing the guitar in your spare time?
Yeah, my mom had a guitar laying around, and I'd pick it up once in a while and just learn a couple chords. I got a chord chart. Just kind of learned on my own. I had a lot of spare time, and so learned my chords. And we started a little garage band when I was 14, called ourselves Roadrunner. And yeah, on Saturdays or Sundays we'd get together and we'd jam. And looking back now, I think we weren't that good, but we had a lot of fun. And as a kid, I think music needs to be fun, and it showed me that there's something out there that I loved, and that I wasn't that good at the time, but I wanted to get good at it. And I think that nowadays it'd be so tough for kids. Like, there's so much, even me, myself, I'm an adult, and I love video games, and I love, there's all this media all the time. And so I'm really thankful that I grew up, outside of that world where you had to make your own entertainment. You had to make your own fun. And I think that was, without me being removed from this whole media frenzy that we have nowadays, I don't think I would have got into music.
The kind of joke I want to go off here too is you mentioned that the band name was Roadrunner. I'm wondering, did you ever have a rival band called Wild E. Coyote? No, but we could have. That would have been great. We didn't really play out much. We mostly just played in that. We were actually in the garage. Like, it was a garage band, and we did a recording once. I remember we recorded at the high school had a little recording studio, and I remember us sitting out there after we did a recording going, man, this is awesome. My drummer's uncle came by, and he was a rocker. He had this awesome white Camaro, and he had a leather jacket and slicked back hair. There was a scene out of Grease, and he showed up, and we're like, oh, Uncle Joe, and then we showed him the music, and he's like, this is great. And our aspirations at the time were to get good enough to play in bars. We'd sit around and go, oh man, we're so good. I think someday we're going to get into the bar and we're going to play in the bar. That was our goal, right? We never thought much beyond that. So to be where I am today was something completely unexpected. You worked at a sawmill. Is that correct?
Yeah, my first job, I guess my first real job was, 16, just turned 16, worked at the local sawmill for, I guess, on and off for about 9 years.
No, I just thought that was interesting because, usually when you hear about musicians, you kind of hear through their struggles of, their whole life they picked up a guitar or played a guitar. But, it seemed like in Canada, even as a musician, you still have to have another job on the side. So I just thought that was kind of interesting that you worked at a sawmill.
Yeah, it's definitely my day job. And I remember sometimes at night I'd come up with ideas for songs, and I'd scratch them on my hard hat because I didn't get a nail in a
scratch the lyrics on my hard hat because I didn't have any paper. And I remember just sitting out there on the deck, after everything was cleaned up, and just looking up at the moon and thinking, man, I wonder if it's possible moving to Nashville and chasing this dream, or is it just crazy? And I ended up just taking that leap one day and went down.
This was in 2004. You moved to Nashville to pursue the musical career. Although you did find a contract, you kind of had an issue with the U.S. work permit that forced you to move back to Canada. And then, of course, your producer, Keith Stegall, he helped you sign with Broken Bow Records. So how important was Keith Stegall to all of this moving forward?
Keith had a big part in it. I think the bigger part was Matt Roby, who's been my producer. He started co-producing that album, the first album, with Keith, and Keith ended up just saying, hey, you know how to do this. You've done this for years with me. Like, Matt's worked with Keith for years on the Alan Jackson records, Dolly Parton, George Jones, Zach Brown Band. And so basically Keith just stepped away and let Matt take off with it, which was awesome because Matt's incredible talent. And yeah, I'd say between Matt and Keith, they both had a really big hand in me getting signed to Broken Bow Records.
You released the debut single, Brothers. How important or how special was that to release that single?
I think it was really important for my career. Like, we didn't plan on releasing that song right away. We had a totally different song in mind when we did the U.S. and Canadian radio tour. We basically go to every radio station, every reporting radio station in North America, and you play like 3 or 4 songs in their conference room at these radio stations. And every time I did my 3 or 4 songs, they're like, we like Gravity, but oh man, that Brothers song, I think our listeners would just love that song. And so it ended up being a really a big moment for me. Like, I wrote the song and thought, well, this means a lot to me, but I wasn't sure it would resonate with other people. And it turns out it did, and it turns out it was a really big song for me, and it still is today. Like, we still play it, and I just think a lot of people, we understand family. Everybody understands family, and just how much the family means to us. And if we have trouble with family, we know what we would like in a family. And so I just think it hit a chord with people understanding sacrifice and taking care of those that you love around you.
I definitely get that kind of sentiment from the song. I kind of agree with what they said too, or what you kind of went off of. I liked Gravity. I liked Brothers. Now, you've released 6 albums to date. One of the ones that really kind of got me really interested in your music was I liked Crop Circles. I even liked the song that Crop Circles that came from that album. Can you kind of describe what you were going for in that song?
I was going for a little bit of a psychedelic edge, and I'd say almost every album that we've done, we do one song that's kind of out there. And for that album, Crop Circles, the song was out there.
You have a 6th album out now, Beautiful Freak Show, and it recently earned 3 awards at the CCMAs. How special was that?
Man, it was pretty cool. It was a risk again. This album, especially the song "Beautiful Freak Show," was a risk, and in the end, radio didn't really. They didn't play it. Like, they didn't get on board with it. So it was maybe too edgy, although like my fans love it. And so, yeah, it was maybe too risky for radio. And yeah, and having the awards, so I mean, Bush Party was the most sold Canadian song last year, and we won for album design. Mitch Nevins is an amazing designer. He's been working on my albums, I think, for 5 albums now. So that was cool. We got that one, and then songwriter for Time was awesome. Because for me, that's where it all started, was songwriting, and I'm hoping someday that's where it keeps going. Like, I could see hopefully writing songs into my 70s. Like, I just really love painting pictures and trying to tell other people's stories, telling my own story, celebrating the country way of life. I hope I can do that for years to come.
Who are some of the artists that you looked up to growing up to get you into music?
For me, I think the Beach Boys were really big. I had an 8-track. My dad had an 8-track out in the garage, and I'd go out there and play Beach Boys' Endless Summer, the 8-track, like over and over and over again. And so I think that's where I kind of got my love for beach music. But then, like, other stuff too, like I'd listen to AC/DC and Aerosmith and Guns N' Roses and stuff, all those hair bands, like I was listening to that stuff. We didn't have a dedicated country station where I grew up. Like, they played everything. They played Anne Murray, and then they'd play Bruce Springsteen and Metallica. Like, and so for me, I think maybe that's why, like, in my writing, I draw from a lot of different places, and I think you can see that, especially on an album like Beautiful Freak Show, where there's all kinds of different, there's got a reggae song on there, we've got some bluegrassy kind of stuff. I love it all. I love music, and I think it's exciting right now in country music because it is such a broad spectrum. You have Sam Hunt, and then you've got someone like Chris Stapleton, both residing somehow in the same genre, and I think it's it's an exciting time to be a creator.
Going off that idea, I want to ask this. My generation right now calls it, there's the old school country, and then they call it the new generation country. I like both, but I can see that there's a difference in them. Do you consider it two different genres, or do you think that they kind of sound the same so that they should be all clarified as country?
There definitely are branding it all as country, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. I love new country. I love the rock influence on the new country, even the pop influence. But I also love the old stuff. The reason I got into country music, and when I say old, I'm talking like Randy Travis. I'm not talking like George Jones, even though I'm a huge George Jones fan. Like, what got me into country was when Tim McGraw came on the scene, and Randy Travis, Mark Chestnut, Clay Walker, Kentucky Headhunters. Like, that's the kind of stuff that went, I was like, this is kind of like rock, but it's kind of not. And I felt I could relate to the lyric. Like, it was really easy for me to write from the country point of view because I grew up there. So it was like second nature. I knew nothing about urban life. I couldn't write an urban song. But yeah, I forget what your question was, Brian.
No, that's fine. Like, you answered it. The interesting point that I was going to make off of that when you mentioned about Tim McGraw, I like Tim McGraw. I like Garth Brooks. And the joke I was about to make there was a comedian named Ron White makes a joke that there's people, I can't remember where he was to. I think it was Nashville, and they were mentioning about them liking Garth Brooks, and he was like, yeah, but he's like, I don't like country. Or he was getting in a debate about how he didn't like Garth Brooks, and they were like, how can you not like Garth Brooks? He's country and he's rock and roll. He's the best of both worlds. And I was thinking to myself, and I said, we had Shania Twain up here that was kind of like country and pop, but with all those influences, you can just kind of see it now in the new country that they kind of have the twang, but also bring in their own styles. Like, you mentioned about all the influence you had with the Beach Boys, and you mentioned about like a reggae song on your CD. I liked Bush Party, but every song that you have has a little bit of a difference in it, which I kind of enjoy too.
Yeah, we have fun in the studio. Like, we try different things, and I'm lucky to work with Matt because he's okay to go down those winding roads with me. I think maybe other producers might be like, all right, Dean, like, you need to pick what your sound is going to be like and just stick to it. But he loves going in those directions, and sometimes we get a little lost and got to find the trail again. But he's been a really fun and great influence on what I do and how I create music. So hopefully we'll keep being able to do that. And yeah, it's exciting right now. Like, I feel like it's wide open out there. I know, back probably 15 years ago, it felt like country was in quite a box. Like, you had to write between these lines. And if you strayed too far, it was just you completely disregarded. And then all of a sudden, I'm not sure if it was because of the iTunes world where people started buying singles again, and you had all these kids with different playlists from all kind of genres. All of a sudden, it just blew up in every direction. Like country, you could go over here, you could go over here, you could go over here, and even collaborations that were happening cross genres. And so it just opened everything up. Like, as a songwriter, it's a really great place to be right now.
And speaking of collaborations, I want to mention one. I'm a Newfoundlander, so I guess you might sense where I'm going with this one. And of course, it is a Friday. You did a awesome song with Great Big Sea. It's Friday. It's pretty much, I believe in Newfoundland, it's almost like an unsung anthem in a way, because as soon as Friday hits, I guarantee you when they're going to their cabins, that is somewhere on the dial on their playlist. How fun was it to team up with Great Big Sea to write that song?
Man, it was so fun. Like, I think where we had the most fun was when we actually got to come here to Newfoundland and do the video with the guys. And I remember we were up on the rooftop of one of the buildings on, I think it was Water Street or George, I'm not sure. We were playing, and there was me and Alan and the guys were up on the roof, and then there was a wedding happening just up on the hill. And Alan's like, hey, let's go. Like, he waved at them and they waved back, and Alan's like, let's go. And so I'm running behind Alan across the rooftops and then on down the street and then up the hill, and all of a sudden we were in the middle of this wedding party singing a song, and it was really cool. It was totally impromptu, and that wedding, that party ends up in the video, and it wasn't planned, it just happened. So it was just really cool, man, to be able to work with. I have a huge respect for music that's come out of the East Coast and Newfoundland in particular. Like, being a Western kid, like growing up, I was always like, oh man, it's just great music out here, and so diverse and so organic. And so to be able to collaborate with Great Big Sea and Sean, Bob, and Alan, like, it was awesome, man. A little intimidating almost.
Yeah, they're pretty huge in Newfoundland. I've got to speak to Alan earlier, actually, on this podcast, or on this season of the podcast, and he's a very chill dude. And I mean, to me, that idea of him saying let's just go to a wedding, or like because he's seen it, doesn't surprise me at all. But I'm sure you were kind of looking at me like, really, you're just going to do that? But in Newfoundland, it's almost like, oh, someone's having a wedding, yeah, let's go and see. If they're waving us over, yeah, they're friendly, let's go to it.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. The first time I was here, I noticed that. I walked with Alan after that video shoot. We walked down to a pub. I forget what it was. Maybe called O'Reilly. Does that sound right? It was on Water Street, and there was an Irish. There was a band from Ireland playing there. But yeah, everybody on the street seemed to know Alan. It was pretty wild. Such a friendly place, you know. People talk about it, and you do come here and you find that. You're like, wow, there's some real hospitable people here and really genuine people, and I love being out here. Love playing, love the scenery. It's inspiring, man, in every way.
And the last question I have for you, you've had a lot of success. You've had 16 CCMA Awards, 2 Juno Awards. Of course, you're going to keep going. You're only 42. Just recently, about a month ago, had a birthday, so happy belated.
Thank you.
The one thing I have to ask is, what's next for you? What does the future hold?
Yeah, I'm moving to Nashville next week, so moving back, and I'm excited about that. I miss the creative community there. I miss being sharpened by other writers, and so I'm so excited. I've been writing like crazy. We'll have another record, I think, 2018. Start recording as soon as I get down there. But yeah, I miss it. It's been, I think, 6 years now where I've just written by myself, and I think it's good. I think it's good to have those other people around you to bounce things off of and sharpen you as a writer and inspire you, and so yeah, it's a big move, but it's a place that's also home for me. It's kind of my second home, so I'm looking forward to that. More recording, and yeah, we may try something in the U.S. too. I'm not sure if it comes, and if it doesn't, I just want to write and keep playing for my Canadian fans and keep celebrating this way of life that is important. It's important to have a spotlight on it.
That's going to do it for this episode of Tobin Tonight. Our thanks to Dean Brody for coming on the show. Remember, you can find past, present, and future episodes on TobinTonight.com, Spotify, and iTunes. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and leave a comment or two. For Tobin and myself, this is Jacob saying, I want to have a bush party or hang out with Dean. He sounds like a fun guy. Thanks for listening, and good night.